Welcome back to part 7. I think it's part 7. Part 7 of our series where we are building a Python trading robot for the TD Ameritrade API. So I know it's been a while. It's been like what, almost 3 weeks since I last posted a video. There's been a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, it was a lot of more just life stuff going on and having to do a bunch of paperwork I didn't want to have to do. But regardless, whatever it is, that stuff has kind of calmed down a little bit. So I'm going to kind of come back to this, start doing more of the wonderful videos. Really, we're kind of just picking up where we left off last time. I know last time was a long time ago. What we're going to focus on in this video is now start talking about the trade object. So the trade object really is designed to mimic this idea of an order, right? And this is probably going to be one of the more complex objects that we have to build, simply because of the reality that really your order is going to depend on how you trade. And so as much as I would love to think I have the capability to make this easy across the board for everybody, the reality is it will be a little bit complicated. And in those situations, we'll kind of have I'll say a fallback that we can do. So there's basically a methodology we can use that says, let's just assume we don't want to have to go through 9 different steps to create this thing. We just want to kind of give you the ultimate flexibility of saying, hey, give us the order, and then we'll just put it right in there for you. So that is something I am looking into. However, for more simple orders, we have some more functionality that we can play with. And ideally, as this library kind of expands over time, we want to be able to do more with it and make it a little bit easier for common scenarios. So even though this might be a little confusing at points, just keep in mind there will always be this kind of fallback method where if you want to just pass me a dictionary that represents your order, you are more than welcome to do that. However, by doing that, in some cases, you might lose some functionality and I might not be able to give you certain information about your order. So things like, hey, how many children does it have? How, does it have an opposite order attached to it or something along that nature? So just keep that in mind. Additionally, I did want to let people know I did recently push to the Python trading robot. And then also, I don't know if people have been aware of it. I'm sure some have. But GitHub is apparently testing out a new user interface. So if you actually go over to your little profile, you can see the feature preview. And it will give you the option for the UI interface. And so this is what it looks like now. So it's pretty similar, but you can obviously tell they've changed certain icons. Yeah, it's different. I mean, I'm getting used to it. There's certain things I'm kind of like, okay, I like that. There's some other stuff I'm kind of like, maybe go back to the old way. But for the most part, I think it's a good change. It looks like it's pretty well laid out. But yeah, most of the stuff I was doing was just updating the README, just trying to give a little bit more clarity on that. And then also I did add some information related to indicators. So I added in some more indicators for everybody. And then I also added in some more information on some of the other objects, just little minor modifications here and there, just maybe adding in some more basic functionality. But this one really is going to be the one that you're probably going to see the most change over time, just because I'm going to try to add in as many indicators as I can, but that's just something I kind of go at it when I get a little bit of free time here and there. And then additionally, I did want to let people know that there is actually a new API library that I did publish if you'd like to use it. And that one is for TradeStation. So for individuals who would like access to the TradeStation API, I did build a Python API library for this one as well. So it's pretty similar to the TD, the IB, and so now there's the TS, we'll just call it TradeStation. So it's very similar. However, with this API, most people are not going to qualify, or at least I would say most, new investors who might not have a lot of capital, because in order to get access to this one, you have to have $100,000 in your account. If you don't have it, you ain't getting it. And I will reiterate that. You will not get access. They are very strict on that. I have had people reach out and they have given me the stories. And so this is really intended for somebody who wants access to that API and they have funds already in that account. But again, something interesting, might want to play around with it and stuff like that. But, just be aware that for most people, they're probably not going to be able to access it. So that's all. Alrighty, let's get started. Is this the right one? Is it not the right one? So, hopefully this looks familiar, but as you can tell, we are now back in Visual Studio Code, and we have now added a few different little objects. So we have our robot object, we have our portfolio object, our stock frame object, and our indicator object. So lots of good stuff here. We've noticed that our indicators are relatively limited, but nothing too fancy. So what we're going to do from here is we're now going to add a new file. That file is going to be called trades.py. Oh, do I already have trades in here? I do have trades in here. So you don't need to, well, you do need to create it if you don't have it, but apparently I didn't see it right there in front of me. And then inside of the trades.py file, we're going to do what we've done in the previous files. We're going to import a couple of different things. So the first thing is we're going to import our date time object. So again, this is a nice, easy way for us to utilize a date time and do things like parse strings, add and change those date times to kind of better match our objects. And then we are using that typing library. So we're going to be using import list. And then from typing, we're going to be importing union. And then from typing, we're going to be importing optional. All right. We're going to create a new class object. This class object will be called trade. Like all of our previous objects, we're going to have an init method. And what's going to happen in this init method? Well, we're going to define a couple different properties. So the first one is going to be our main order object. This will be a blank dictionary that over time we will add different key value pairs to it. And then as we kind of add to it, we're making an order, right? So we've seen this in in many previous videos. We have a dictionary, we add components to it. When we start adding it, we're really building our order. And so we're defining things like the instrument, we're defining things like the side we're going to be taking, the type of order we're going to be taking. So it's a very important process, but we have also seen it can be a little bit complicated. Additionally, we will have something called a trade ID. This is just a nice, easy, unique way to have an ID associated with an order. This is more for storage purposes down the road. It would be nice if we can look back and say, hey, what was this trade associated with? And we have some type of unique identifier. So we might not see all the benefits right now, but trust me, having some type of identification is very, very useful. Additionally, we will have a side. So the side is basically whether we're going long or short. And so ideally, there will be some things that when we define our new order, we'll define whether we're going long or short. And then additionally, we will also want to know, well, what is the opposite side that we could be taking, right? So for example, it might be something where I might want to have kind of like a range, like so a stop loss and then a take profit order. So when you tell me what side you're taking behind the scenes, I'm going to know, well, what's the opposite of the side he just told me he's going to be doing? So this is, again, just an easy way. So down the road, if we want to add another component to our order, we already have that information ready to go, and we're not having to spend a lot of time trying to infer what it is. Additionally, we can have something where we're going to enter or exit a position. So this is important as well. We can go long, but we can go long to enter a position, and then we can, we can also, in some cases, go long to exit a position, right? So we can basically do a buy order to exit a position. So this is why this little differentiating factor, again, is useful, because when it comes to building more complex orders, this makes asking those questions a little bit more straightforward. And again, we're going to have an opposite as well. Additionally, we're going to have something called an order response. So this is more behind the scenes for me. But every time we submit an order to the TD Ameritrade API, there's some information sent back to us. We're going to store that information in this little property, and then we're going to be using it at different points, right? And then additionally, we will be having a flag, which is called trigger added. And so this is again where down the road, maybe we want to make it a trigger order. We now have a flag that will say, hey, this is a trigger order. So if we need to ask other questions down the road, or if we need to modify something, we already know beforehand what pieces need to be modified based on if it's a trigger order or not. This also goes the same for a multi-leg order. So this is where things can really get complicated really quickly, because if you have a multi-leg order, we might at some point have to say, well, when you want to modify a leg, what leg do you mean? Do you mean the first one? Do you mean the second one? So if you don't give me certain information, I kind of assume it for you, but we will also see there's some functionality added in there where you can specify it explicitly. Okay, and then we're gonna have a method called new trade. And this new trade is gonna have a few arguments that we're gonna pass through. The first one is gonna be called ID, and that will be a string. The next one will be a order type that will also be a string. We're gonna have one that is a side that will also be a string. And then enter or exit, that will also be a string. And then we're gonna have a price. That will be a float that is initialized to 0. And then we're gonna also have a stop limit price, which is also a float, and it's also initialized to 0. This will return back a dictionary. And sorry, again, I know there's a lot of kind of thing, but I have increased the font. So hopefully it's easier to read. Side effect is it goes a little bit further than I like. Okay, so we're passing in all this information. What are we planning to do with it, right? Well, we should probably start out by filling in the information that we kind of wanted to know when we initialize the object. So the first one is obviously the trade ID. So first, give me that trade ID. It's nice to have some type of order. And from here, this is where I'm going to kind of start jumping in between two screens. So bear with me a little bit. This is just more to save on the typing more than anything and prevent typos. But here it is. Okay. And we'll just kind of talk through some of this first, and then you'll kind of see what I'm doing. So again, just bear with me a tiny bit. This is more just to kind of simplify my life and not have to have a lot of stuff. So one very important piece is the order type. Right now it's limited. We have market, limit, stop, stop limit, and trailing stop. So ideally they would pass through one of these little things right here with this particular argument. So say this is going to be market. Great, you gave me that. Then I'm going to know it's a market order. So this is when I take the all uppercase one, because we know with the TD Ameritrade that it does have to be certain casing, and then that has to be named a certain way. So this will return the type of order. And then additionally, we have order instructions. So we can either enter or exit a position, and we can either go long or short. And then based on what that is, it's either going to be a buy, a sell short, buy to cover. So these are order instructions. Next, we have our order, right? So here we're actually filling in this little guy right here. And with this one, we're going to have a couple different things. So one is it's going to be the order strategy type. So initially it's always assumed to be single, but we can change that down the road. And then from here, we're going to have the order type. So we have order strategy type, and then we have order type. So the order type is going to be returned from this little dictionary based on the string that you pass through. So if you pass in MKT, guess what this is going to be? It's going to be market. Very important to understand that. We then have session and duration. These all default to normal and day. Finally, we have our order leg collection. So initially, I have quantity set to 0. The instruction is basically going through this little nested dictionary. So if you say your enter exit, so I'm going to enter and I'm going to go long, then it's going to return buy. If I'm going to enter and I'm going to go short, it's going to be sell short. So here I'm just kind of going through that nested dictionary. That's all I'm doing. And I'm just returning it. So even though initially it might be like, oh, seems like there's a lot going on here. There is, but there really isn't at the end of the day. I'm literally just kind of accessing some dictionaries based on the information you gave me. So it's all kind of pre-populated, and I'm just filling out this kind of standardized template that ideally down the road, we're gonna modify a tiny bit. So that's filling out our, we'll just call it our like standard template, right? That kind of makes it a little bit easier. It might not be the final product yet, but it's our starting template that we can build off of. Okay, so now that we've defined that, let's start going through and filling out some other pieces of our order if it was passed through. So for example, say they gave me an order type that is a stop. Well, in that case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, okay, that's fine. I'm gonna put in a new key into my order dictionary, and that's gonna be a stop price. So take a step back for a second and let's ask, okay, so the user said, I want my order to be a stop order. Fine, go ahead, I'm okay with that. But now, what I'm going to assume is that that price you gave me is really the stop price. It's not a normal price, that's your stop price. So I infer that by first looking at, well, what was the order type you gave me? You gave me a stop order. That's fine. I'm going to infer that you really want that price to be a stop price, because why else would you give me a stop order, right? So that's the logic I'm using behind the scenes, is I'm saying, well, you gave me a stop order, so I'm assuming that price you gave me is really the stop price. Now, what I could technically do, if I wanted to be really explicit, I would put in stop price here. And I might actually do that depending on if I find the feedback just seems like it's causing more confusion than necessary. So don't get too attached to this input right now, but for right now, it's gonna be price. Down the road, we might adjust it a tiny bit. Okay, so that's stop price. The next one is a limit price. So elif, the order type is limit, then guess what? Now we're just going to change this to price, okay? So we're just kind of modifying the key based on what you gave me. That's all. The next one is if the order type is stop limit, then there's a couple different pieces that need to be filled out. So the first one is going to be the stop price. Well, that's kind of like up here, right? That's kind of like right up here. And then we're going to have the other price. So that's going to kind of be that limit component as well. However, this one is not going to be the price. It's actually going to be that stop limit price argument that is passed through over here. So this is where things can kind of get a little confusing for most people, just because you have to know what each price really is based on the market, on the order type that you're giving me. So that's how this is kind of all defined behind the scenes. Finally, we're going to talk about the trailing stop. So we're going to talk about a trailing stop. And then this one is going to be, well, I should have just copied it, make my life easier. This one's going to be a trailing stop. And then this one has a lot of stuff going on. And then actually, this one's actually not kind of finished yet. And then this is where I kind of look back going, this is where things can get a little bit more complicated, just because a trailing stop has a couple different things that can obviously be problematic. So one is we have this stop price link basis. That's the first one. Then we have a stop price link type. And right now I'm kind of initializing all of this to just empty stuff, because right now I'm debating if I really should just kind of have this be its own little separate method where you say, hey, specify like trailing stop or something like that, just to kind of keep it on its own little thing, only because from my experience, it can get a little bit messy if you're not careful. That's the only thing that I kind of warn people, is it can get messy with the trailing stops, is that you have to fill out so much information. And then finally, we're going to have self.order, and then we're going to have a stop type that will be equal to standard, just like that. And there you go. Super simple. So for right now, don't use trailing stop. That's just kind of a placeholder. Really, what this is probably going to be is down the road, it's going to be more than likely like its own little separate method, just to, not really ask for 90 different arguments right up here. We'll just kind of say, hey, set stop, trailing stop or something like that, just to make our lives a little bit easier. How long has this been going? Okay, I'm going to cut it from right here. So next video, we're going to kind of finish up this new trade. And then really from there, it's not been too crazy. What you're going to really be seeing is I'm just going through and I'm really modifying different parts of our order. And I'm just basically having that kind of modification functionality be separated into its own method. And then once you kind of see it like that, I don't think it's too complicated, but I will say, I think out of all the objects, the trade ones, it's hard because these orders can get really messy really quickly. So you really have to kind of just take a step back, look at it and go, okay, what are we trying to do in this example? Understand that I might not be able to carry everything over to another order, but generally there's some type of structure behind the scenes that we can leverage. So that's really the important part. So any questions, by all means, put them down in the comments below. And then in the next video, we'll wrap up this one and then we'll start going on to more of the modifications. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in video number 8.